I'm talking to Charlie Rizzuto. This guy's got a pretty impressive project out there called Train Your Teacher. And Charlie's going to get into some details that go into that, and I'm hoping to see a lot of people kick this off. But Charlie, hey, why don't you just introduce yourself?
Yeah, great. My name is Charlie Rizzuto. I'm a physical education teacher at Oyster Bay High School on Long Island, New York. I teach 7 through 12 PE. We have 7 through 12th graders all in one building. I've been teaching for 5 years now, so I'm still in the beginning stages of my career, trying to grow every day. My class sizes are anywhere between 12 to 32 students, depending on the grade level and the period that class is being held.
Nice, man. Well, I'm glad to get connected this way, and really looking forward to showcasing, this massive project that you did, which I think a lot of people can benefit from. But before, we talked a little bit about the 3 Rs, and it's just a great way for you to approach your teaching and to approach your students. So do you just want to lead everyone through the 3 Rs before we get into the big deal, the big project here?
Yeah, definitely. The 3 Rs was something that I didn't hear about until really this year at Superintendent's Conference Day. Our superintendent gave a presentation on the new 3 Rs in education, which are Rigor, Relevance, and Relationships. And one of the greatest things to hear in the presentation was it gave me the opportunity to kind of think to myself, well, do I do this already? And if I do, are there opportunities that I miss where I could and I don't? And the answer was kind of both. Yeah, I do this in a lot of ways and in a lot of regards, but there are opportunities through my teaching that I might miss where I could make stronger relationships with my students, or I could make the learning process a little more rigorous. And it also got me thinking, as physical education teachers, sometimes we miss opportunities to take things that may be classified as, general ed professional development because we may think it doesn't apply to us. Or to look at it another way, a phrase that I use is oftentimes we skip rocks. And if you could, remember back to when you were a kid, or maybe you still do it now, you're, walking around along the water, you find that perfect rock or that perfect shell, and you kind of just toss it and you try to get it to skip along the surface. And I think oftentimes we're introduced to a new learning approach or teaching approach. We hear it and we automatically internalize it, but we just skip along the surface. So the way I internalize, I like to drop boulders. I like to go deep with things rather than skipping rocks. So when I look at rigor, oftentimes we hear rigor and we say, okay, it has to be hard work. Well, rigorous work is more than hard work. Like, rigorous work has to take the student to a new place through the experience. And one of the ways that I look at it, to look at the physical end of it, is if I could jump on a 4-foot platform with my vertical jump, and I go and I work out and I jump up there for a set, and my heart rate may be up and I may be sweating and I may be tired, and that may be hard work. But the rigor would be trying to get 4-2, and the process and the training that would go into increasing my vertical jump to that new level. And that's kind of how I approach rigor with my students, bringing them to a new place, making them wonder and think critically and make connections through the learning experience to bring them to a new area. And relevance and relationships in the same way. Like, to me, relevant learning doesn't just mean value, although it does, but it's more than that. It's the transfer of the learning. Can this relate to them in real life scenarios? And can they internalize it themselves? It's not relevant to me as a teacher. It has to be relevant to them as a student. And that's really hard. And every time I approach a project or a lesson or an assessment, I struggle with that sometimes, because myself, I can make it relevant for me. I can make it relevant for one person. But when you have a class of 32 and you're trying to make this relevant for all of them, sometimes that could be rigorous, a rigorous thing that we have to do as teachers to make sure that happens. But it's really important that it's a personalized learning experience, and it's important to them. They could transfer it out of the gym. And this idea of relationships, to me, is more than mere likability. Students liking us is great. And Rita Pearson has a great quote in her TED Talk. Kids don't learn from people they don't like. And I completely agree with that. But I feel like in our discipline specifically, it has to be more than that, because there's a dynamic of physical education being fun. And I kind of use this term of supervised and glorified recess. And if our kids like us because that's what we do, it doesn't enhance the learning process. Like, our kids have to like us because we're fun, but also because they know that we genuinely care for them and their learning experience and their learning process. And even outside of that, there's mutual respect between students and the teacher, and the students understand that they're valued in your classroom and through the learning process. And there's a shared struggle there. If I'm going to ask you to work hard as a student, that student should recognize that you're working hard as a teacher. And that will kind of enhance them or push them a little bit further when you do challenge them to meet you with the challenge and to work through the challenge with you. And I completely understand that sometimes, I hear the rumblings of my students when I challenge them in a particular way, and they might not want to do it because, this is phys ed class or whatever the case may be, but they always produce good work. And I feel like they do that because they understand that I'm in this with them. And that's a much stronger relationship than them simply or merely liking me because we have fun with Mr. Rizzuto in phys ed class.
Nice, man. Dropping boulders on the Phys Ed podcast. Unbelievable with the 3 R's. Love it. Love it. So great approach to your teaching. And, as PE teachers, we're always looking for ways to connect. And, like you say, build those relationships, build that relevance and rigor. And, what a great project that you came up with, training your teacher. And we're always teaching our kids to be fit, for the rest of their lives. And, you being 7 to 12, you're really setting them up well with this project. So just want to give us some details into the Train Your Teacher project.
Yeah, absolutely. So I kind of came up with this idea for the Train Your Teacher project even before I had heard of the 3 R's. And it was one of the things that I do that when I heard about the 3 R's, I had to think about to say, well, is this one of the things that fit? And it fit perfectly. It was seamless. And that's kind of why I wrote about it and kind of tried to share it. But so essentially what I wanted to do with the project was I wanted the students to do a performance-based assessment, but kind of in the cognitive domain where they were showing what they learned and how they can apply the concepts that they learned. So we started out by learning about the sport fit model, the difference between type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers, and a lot of different fitness concepts. And then we learned a lot about, exercise equipment that they may have not been introduced to before. Battle ropes, medicine balls, slide boards, kettlebells, resistance bands, parachutes, and all these different things that some of them had used, but none of my students had used all of them. And we learned about the different ways that you could train, the different benefits of each piece of equipment. And then what I did was I went around to the school and I asked some teachers if they wanted to take part in this project. And this is really where the relationship end of it comes in, and you're building strong relationships, not only in your class, but throughout your building. And that's one of the things that I really love about this project. So essentially, I asked the teachers if they'd be up to donate 2 off periods in the next 2 to 3 weeks, depending on the size of my class and how much time I felt that we needed to complete the project. The first class, they would come in and they'd be teamed up with a student and they'd get interviewed on their fitness goals and where they may be fitness-wise. And then the next time they came back, 2-3 weeks later, again, whatever the case may be, that student would train them and take them through a program that they designed specifically for them. So in terms of the students, after we learn all of these things, we come together as a class and we design the interview. And during the interview, we came up with questions, are you currently on a workout regimen? Describe your current lifestyle. Do you have any injuries? Are there particular instances where you feel short of breath or tired? And we came up with about 8 to 10 different questions that we felt would provide us valuable information to build a program. And then we asked the teacher if there was anything else that they wanted to add. And I gave the students and I encouraged the students, really, it was a formative assessment piece in this regard for me, to build off those questions. So as a class, we came up with questions. It was kind of a group piece to the project. But individual with your teacher, based on the answers they give you, expand off that answer and ask a follow-up question specific for your teacher. So after we gathered all of this information, then we took about 2 to 3 classes. And the students took the concepts that we learned and we discussed prior to the interview. They took the information that they gathered through the interview, and we started to design routines specifically for those teachers to help them reach the goals that were discussed during the interview. And oftentimes during that period, it was kind of like an open forum in those classes where we're collaborating with each other. Students are asking questions to me, to other students, and we're working in almost like a lab type setting. Building off each other's ideas and sharing ideas with each other and experiences and exercises that maybe I hadn't taught them yet, but they had learned somewhere else. And it really broadened the scope of everything that they were learning during this unit. And it was amazing for me as a teacher to be involved in it, but also from time to time to step back and just watch it all happen. And I don't really love it when people say students teaching other students, but I love the idea of students learning from other students. And to me, there's a little bit of a difference there, and that's exactly what was happening. So when we got towards the end of the program, in terms of them designing it, we go, into the weight room, and they grab the equipment, and they, go through their program with each other and talk about teaching cues, because that's another end of it. Now they may be putting their teacher through something they've never done before, but they have to be able to teach it. They have to use the right wording and to get the teacher in the proper form, and all of those things that we're learning about as we go through the project. And then when we're ready, teachers come back, they meet us in the gym. I bring all the equipment upstairs. They're in their shorts and their T-shirts and their sweats, and they're in completely different attire than the students are used to seeing them in. I take them through a quick dynamic warm-up because I want to make it educational for the teachers as well. We want this to be something that that can transfer right out of the gym, that the teachers can turn around and actually use. And while I'm doing that, the students are getting ready, making sure everything's set up, kind of shaking off the nerves. And then once I'm done warming them up, the teachers go with their students and they start training them. And it's amazing. I'm watching my colleagues interact with my students in a completely different dynamic than they've ever had the opportunity to before. And you want to think about building strong relationships. I mean, here are these kids that have administrators and math teachers. None of the teachers that volunteered were phys ed teachers. So they have administrators coming in. Dr. O'Hara, our principal, came in and got trained. English teachers, math teachers, science teachers, saying, you're important enough for me to give up my free time to come and aid in your learning. And that's a powerful thing for students to experience.
I mean, just very impressive, how you bring the whole school together like that. And I know not at one point in time did you think, well, I'm just doing this for my program and to advocate for my program. I mean, it was all about the kids and the kids learning. But as I was hearing you say it and just talk about it, like, what great advocacy for what your kids have learned and their chance and their ability to showcase that. And I'm sure that those teachers were blown away at how much those kids knew and how much they learned in phys ed, with you and, like you said, with their other students. So just very, very cool, all-encompassing project, and a great way to showcase all the learning that can occur, when you're talking about fitness and training plans and all that stuff. So great. Just quickly, if you can, I know sometimes it might not work out where every teacher might come down. So could you give us just a couple of different modifications just in case there's a teacher out there that wants to try this and maybe they struggle getting every teacher involved or enough teachers. So if you got a couple of different backup plans that you could share quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I implemented the project, this was something I had to think about just in case it didn't work and I wasn't able to match students up with teachers on a one-to-one basis. So one of the things that I thought about was maybe getting teachers, if they couldn't come during their off period, or maybe it just didn't match up with the period that I was teaching or whatever, maybe donate 10 minutes of their time one day after school for the interview, and then one afternoon after school for the training and the application of the project. Another thing that we actually did have to do last year, the first time I did this project, was team train. So I'd have 2 students train 1 teacher, and that was cool. And I enjoyed that because, again, it wasn't students teaching students, it was students learning from students, but they would go through that whole process of the interview together and build off each other's ideas. And it was a different way to approach the project and apply the project. And I like that. Another way that I kind of thought about it was having the students interview and design programs for each other if for whatever reason I couldn't get any teachers involved. And obviously when you look at the 3 R's as an approach to teaching, you would lose the relationship end of it a little bit. Well, actually a lot of it in that regard. But still the rigor of the project would be there and the relevance would be there. You just kind of lose the relationship end of it in terms of, the entire building. The relationship end of it between me and the students would still be there because we're going through this rigorous grind of a project together. And it's a struggle for me and they know it, and it's a struggle for them and I know it. So that kind of helps our relationship from student to teacher. But you had a great idea for an elementary level of maybe doing a superhero type of project. He could fly, but he can't run fast. So at the elementary level, kind of looking at it in that way, which I thought was tremendous for the lower levels.
Yeah, just a little more of a case study, and here's the problem with our superhero, and how could we fix it, and come up with a couple of different activities where you could fix it, and that way you can just kind of showcase a couple of different things and some, focus on different components of fitness and
Right.
that kind of stuff. So, yeah, man, some great stuff, and I really appreciate you joining us today and sharing that, because I've learned a ton, and I know all our listeners are learning a ton too, and definitely something that we can implement into our classes. That again, like you say, very relevant, very rigorous, and building some amazing relationships. So love those 3 R's. I appreciate you taking your time. Any last thoughts for us?
No, I appreciate you having me. I love sharing, and there's a big assessment component that we really didn't get into during this, but the Phys Ed Summit on February 21st, I'm going to be part of the high school assessment roundtable, and I'm going to be talking about the project again. And during that, we're really going to get into the assessment end of it, because there's formative assessment opportunities. I use it as a summative assessment, and there's all different avenues that you could explore with this project in terms of assessments also. So I'm really excited to share that.
Nice. We're excited to have you for the Phys Ed Summit on February 21st. Look for that. Get conference schedule coming out soon. So thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. And for the Phys Ed podcast, signing off, Matt Pomeroy.
Wow, I hope you were sitting down for that one, folks. Mr. Rizzuto just dropping boulders of knowledge on us. Just awesome work. Definitely love that project, and hope to see many of you guys using it. If you don't follow him on Twitter, make sure you give him a follow.